Hello, America. Welcome to Your Leo Nation. I am the Chief, and with us today is our great friend Bill Bodner. Bill, how are you?
I'm good, Chief. How are you?
Well, I'm doing okay. I think I'm doing better than most. Maybe not as good as some, but life is great, and I wish it was great for everybody, which obviously that can never happen. But there's a group of people right now. I was just reading the other day, Bill, and it just kind of hit me. It's not new,
Yeah.
but it really hit home. And what I'm talking about, it's children primarily that are being affected by our open border crisis. And here at Your Leo Nation, we believe in and support the rule of law. I have talked about it before about one of the the basic tenets of the rule of law at a national level is really securing our borders, maintaining our sovereignty. And it has so many repercussions. So one of them is really it's what's happening with these unaccompanied minors that are crossing the border.
Hmm.
So I just wanted to talk about that and just really bring it to light, maybe more than it has been lately. I pulled some articles, and by the way, it's not just children; it's children really and women. Um, just horrible stats. But I want to go back in time here a little bit, and I want to talk about some information from an article in the New York Post. And this goes back over 3 years. It goes back to April of 2021. So this is just a few months into the Biden administration. Let me just read a little bit from this article, kind of set the stage.
Hmm.
A recent image of Ecuadorian girls aged 3 and 5 being dropped like packages over the southern border wall shocked many Americans. But it didn't shock experts who say that human traffickers are busier than ever under President Biden, who has expedited the flow of immigrants over the U.S. border. Bill, I don't know about you, but I actually remember that. I had forgotten about it, which is I probably bad on me, but I remember that image. They were literally
Mm.
dropping this little children over the wall. Do you recall that?
I don't remember that, Mark, but I got to say the ages there are just so troubling, man. You know, 3 years old, 5 years old. It's like,
Yeah,
how does that
it's horrible.
happen? Yeah.
Yeah, how does it happen? And we're going to get into that here. And again, this is 3 years ago, and I pulled this article up on purpose uh, because this article is kind of predicting about where we are now, I think for obvious reasons. And we know there's a lot going on with President Biden right now and the
Hmm.
campaign and things like that. And it's not about that. There are plenty of people talking about that. I guess we could too. But I really want to focus on this very specific, it's very narrow result of the Biden administration's policies. This is what I'm talking about. The Biden policy, which puts pressure on border agents to release families and unaccompanied minors into the U.S. within 72 hours, incentivizes impoverished Latin Americans to send their kids on the perilous journey up north, which many of them do not survive. What's more, it has encouraged traffickers to pose as the parents of these children to slip into the US. In his work as a border control agent in Yuma, Arizona from 1994 until 2019, Michael Gramley saw traffickers providing children to unrelated adults so they could more easily gain entry into the US.
Hmm.
Now, Bill, what I'm talking about here is, and I mean, it's right here in black and white, but just imagine using someone's small child as leverage to enter the country. They're simply tools. That's all they are. They're nothing more. They're not human lives. They're not these innocent people. And as a policy lays out so very well, that this behavior escalated tremendously with the Biden administration's policies that open the borders and encourage Latin Americans, South Americans to cross the border. And with that, it's bringing more and more unaccompanied minors because people get in faster with children than they do
Yep.
without.
Yep. It's
Um,
and Mark, what you said there, the key word I think that I heard was incentivizes. And that's really what I think is key to the issue is United States we have incentivized this illegal immigration. And man, don't think for a minute that the people controlling the border, uh, and it's not a government agency on either side right now, Mark. It's criminal organizations that people controlling the border don't understand how to maximize their profit and accomplish their smuggling. And if they need to use children to do that, they're going to use children to do that. And when the people in Central America, especially the cases I saw, from Guatemala, especially Guatemala, of young children being sent up here. Hey, I get it. Some families are sending their kids up here, teenage kids, for a better life, but they don't realize the exploitation that's awaiting them on the journey. And when they get to that no man's land that we're calling our border right now.
And Bill, it's from your background, federal government, 30 years, um, special agent in charge, Los Angeles field office, the DEA. Obviously, there's a lot of crossbreeding, so to
Mm,
speak, in investigations that you worked with
yeah,
human trafficking. And so as well as anybody, the impacts of this. And you laid it out very well. And again, just the way you're speaking, obviously it goes to your experience, your knowledge of this. But you're absolutely right. Let me continue with this. Traffickers probably won't tell a family a child will be sold into commercial sexual exploitation, Gramley said. But once they leave their home country and become indebted to the traffickers, they are at their mercy.
hmm,
It's and again, I know people listening to this have heard about children being exploitable, whatever. But I was just reading this the other day. It's like it really hit home. These are real children. These are innocent children
yep,
that are taken from their parents or parents, like you said, Bill, hoping for a better life, and then never being seen again in way too many cases. It's just heartbreaking as a parent to imagine such a thing. We're gonna do our best to get our child out of this miserable situation here in our country. We're gonna
right,
get him to America, and we have to deal with other people, and then we'll get reunited, and they never see him again.
right.
It just breaks my heart. A record 18,890 unaccompanied minors have crossed the US border illegally in March. So again, this is 3 years ago, 3.5 years ago.
Right.
This year compared to 9,380 the same year same time in 2019. I mean, so it doubled um, from the previous administration to the current administration in just a matter of months. Um, Laura Logan, host of Fox's I'm jazzing more, but she was a host of a show called Laura Logan Has No Agenda, have been covering the crisis at the border. While data is scarce, Logan believes that there's a small fraction of the Latin American children trafficked into the U.S. are being identified. So a very, very small number actually are identified when they get here. No one is tracking his children, she said. U.S. Customs and Border Patrol agents have confided in Logan about the pressure they feel now to get people through as quickly as possible, she said, leading to a less rigorous vetting process than
Hmm.
during the Trump years. She said recent policy changes, such as eliminating DNA testing on adults and children to make sure they're related, have made the problem worse. So they eliminated the standard. It was under the previous administration to make sure that these smugglers are not posing as parents.
Right.
They just let it slide.
Right.
And what's a 10-year-old child going to say?
Right. And you know what's I don't know. The way so here's how it's supposed to work, Mark. And this goes to this guy that we talk about occasionally. He's your old boss, Javier Becerra. I know
Mm,
you like when I say that.
yes.
He's currently the director of the Department of Health and Human Services. They have a branch called the Office of Refugee and Resettlement, right? And that branch or that division of HHS is responsible for placing these children. Now, not the children that come over with adults. That's a very That's one issue, and I think that issue goes to probably, a more nefarious crime taking place when there's someone posing as a parent bringing a child into the country, that the reason is why. But there's also unaccompanied adults, I'm sorry, unaccompanied minors that show up at the border every day, and they are released to complete strangers, Mark. The
Yes.
government will release them to complete strangers. Is their vetting done? Yes, but it's really minimal, and I don't know, can I share this? I gotta find this story,
Oh,
Mark,
please
of
do.
yeah, it was
I
almost
was gonna
like,
get into that, but
it was, yeah, if I'm going too soon here, it was almost like a drug deal in an airport, you know what I mean? The way
yeah,
this exchange of this young, child went down. So, there was there was a child who crossed the border in Arizona, and I think he was 17 years old, taken into custody, and his mother back in Guatemala had heard that he was taken into custody, and she started reaching out to people in the States, um, begging for help. Can someone sponsor him? Can someone get him out of custody? And someone did step forward in the United States to get him, to sponsor him, let's say. No familial relationship. So there was, I mean, they did vetting, and this was a good woman who stepped up and she said, "Hey, if I had a child, I would want someone to do the same thing for my child." She stepped up, and then she told the story of going to Dulles Airport, and this was Northern Virginia, by the way, Mark, where a lot of these undocumented migrants are placed. She told the story of going to Dulles Airport, waiting for the flight to come in, and flight comes in. Here's the 17-year-old, and someone from HHS asks to see her ID. She shows the ID. She signs a couple pieces of paper, but guess what? He leaves, and she's now the caretaker and legal guardian of this 17-year-old, just like that. And in this case, the child did not stay with her that long. So the child was with her originally, everything's going good, and then she says he got a phone call at some point where they spoke like the native, it's almost like an Aztecan language, not Spanish, but a different, very kind of unique, language to Guatemala, and the child was gone the next day, left the house, gone the next day, and she has no idea where he went. And it's like, who has made the decision that it is better to place a child with, someone with no familial relationship at all than turn the child away? I don't know, Mark. At some point in time, is it more responsible to turn that child away, and not allow that child in the United States? You tell me. Or
well,
is it too
it's
late at that
interesting.
point? Is it too
Well,
late because of a policy that has encouraged them all to come up here? Yeah.
Bill, that's exactly right. But it's very interesting you bring up that specific point because in this article, the last paragraph, yeah, we're talking about all these kids coming over unaccompanied. The last paragraph, it says in 2014,
Mhm.
President Barack Obama's message to the people of Latin America was, quote, don't send your children unaccompanied. If they make it, they'll get sent back. More importantly, they might not make it, unquote. See, this was the message from Barack Obama just 10 years ago.
Mhm.
And this goes to exactly what you're saying. Is it too late? And I mean, at this point, we know, unfortunately, tragically, it's too late for untold number of children. Um, I want to move on. I pulled up so much about this because it educated me. I thought I just
And
something
Mark,
hit me. Go ahead.
before we move on, can I say one more thing? Because I want to talk about, and again, this is the case that I'm talking about here. Um, it was a parent who sent their 17-year-old to the States,
Hmm.
and it was done for, let's say, altruistic reasons, right? Wanted a better life for the 17-year-old. But when this unaccompanied minor was taken into custody, uh, where did his mother in Guatemala turn for help? She began asking people at the coffee farm where she worked for help in just connecting her with anyone in the United States
Hmm.
that could get her son out of custody. And the point I'm making is like, that's where the predators are, right?
Hmm.
That's where these predatory people, they're just hibernating and waiting. And through one connection to another connection, all of a sudden, um, this 17-year-old is somewhere where he or she shouldn't be, and the United States government facilitated with it. I just wanted to point that out, that the parents who send their kids, when their kids are put in custody, they're willing to do anything. You know, they're contacting people they don't even know or have any relationship to get their kid out, and that's dangerous.
Yeah, and by the yeah, eh, and and I couldn't say that I can't say I wouldn't do the same thing. In other words, you get into a desperation mode. It's your child. And like you said, Bill, they're sending them here. It, as far as they know, the parents are sending their kids here with the best intentions for their children. And again, it's just heartbreaking. Let me fast forward here a
Yeah.
little bit. Now, this is an opinion piece, but I fast forward 2 years. This is June of 2023, and this is from the Heritage Foundation. Democrats and their hype men in the corporate media defend President Joe Biden's criminal refusal to secure America's southern border as chic, compassionate, and welcoming. And this is the heart of it. President Biden's refusal to secure the southern border. It's not he's not enforcing the federal rule of law, and it's resulting in death, sexual assault, modern day slavery, kidnapping, all goes hand in hand. And again, this is an opinion piece. I want to be careful about it and let everybody knows what it is. But there's a lot of fact in here as well. But in truth, the border crisis is a cauldron of violence against women and children, the
Mhm.
responsibility for which lies directly at the feet of the president, his administration, and the woke elites who have enabled his monstrous policy. The first paragraph I read there was about corporate America. Corporate America is definitely culpable as well in this because they want the cheap labor,
Yep.
and there are other nefarious reasons. So, but again, having an open border facilitates all of these other actors to engage in the behavior they want to. These travesties, sorry, these travesties, to say nothing of the president's oath to faithfully execute the nation's laws, are reason enough for Washington to finally secure the border. And again, this is a year ago, folks. But it's on the other side of the border that Biden's crisis may be taking its most brutal toll. For drug cartels, not the Mexican government, truly control the migration routes north to America. Mexicans, Hondurans, El Salvadorians, Guatemalans, and others making the trek to El Norte have little choice but to hire cartel coyotes to guide them on the way. A criminal racket now worth in the billions
Mhm.
per year. Of course, the poorest and most vulnerable migrants without money must compensate their smugglers in other ways. I'm going to stop right there. I'm going to talk about those other ways in a second, Bill. I don't know if you want to chime in on this with the cartels south of the border.
Yeah, it's 100% true, because so just so people have an understanding, it's not like there's one criminal group that controls the border for human trafficking and another criminal group that controls it for drug trafficking. There is the criminal group, we used to call them gatekeepers. There's the criminal group that controls the border, period. And anyone that wants to conduct any criminal activity in that area, they're paying that organization to allow them to do that. It's the drug cartels that are controlling the border. And you know, you've seen the videos of these vans dropping people off, and people on like all-terrain vehicles with radios patrolling the south side of the border. That's not law enforcement. That's coyotes, or that's they used to call them like halcones or something in Spanish, like the birds that are watching the border and telling people where to cross, etc. It's a billion-dollar business, and you know, it's the same organizations that are shipping drugs up here.
Yes. In the in that previous paragraph, it says that these are the poorest people, these migrants, and they can't pay us money. They have to compensate smugglers in other ways. Well, what do you think those ways are? Quote,
Yeah.
you have to pay with your body. One victim told the New York Times almost 1 in 3 migrant women report being sexually assaulted. Other coyotes prefer younger prey, offering to help mothers cross in exchange for sex with their daughters. Some take money in front only to abandon their clients in the desert.
Hmm.
Hundreds die every year making the heroin journey. Cartels routinely kidnap migrants even after they have paid to squeeze more money out of them. One study estimated that 60% of unaccompanied migrating children are caught by cartels and exploited through child pornography and drug trafficking.
Mhm.
And there's so much more. There's so much more in even in that opinion piece. I won't get into it because I do want to. I'm going to get on the glide path here, to finish up. But again, I know I'm talking a broken record, but when you read these accounts of the actual people that have been exploited, and they have been exploited, they look like you said, Bill. You made it very clear that these people, and I agree with you, the vast majority of these people are simply looking for a better way of life, a better life for themselves, their families, their children,
Yeah.
but they are being exploited. They're being taken advantage of by these cartels, these coyotes who work for their cartels, and being used as really chattel. They're a commodity now. It's all they are. It doesn't matter if they're a year old or if they're 100 years old. All it is. These are real consequences of encouraging, and Bill, as you said, as incentivizing people to cross a non-existent border.
Mhm.
These are these policies are resulting in the deaths and exploitation of untold number of people uh, every single day. The final article, I think is the final article I'm going to talk about it. The New York Times, and for those of you who listen regularly, and I always try to balance it out. I had a Fox News reporter here. Now we're going to go to the New York Times. U.S. failed to safeguard many migrant children, review finds. This is from
Mhm.
this year, finally, 2024. Back in February, an independent government watchdog found serious lapses at the Department of Health and Human Services in its protection. And Bill, I see you nod your head. Protection of children who migrate to the United States on their own, according to a report released Thursday. Again, this is back in February. HHS, the federal agency responsible for sheltering migrant children when they arrive by themselves, repeatedly handed them over to adult sponsors in the United States without thorough vetting and sometimes failed to conduct timely safety checks on children once they were released, said the report by the department's inspector general. And finally, on that, I will define these gaps as very serious, said Haley Levick, the project leader for the review. We know that these children are especially vulnerable to exploitation. I mean, you think so? And
Yeah.
Bill, this is you actually hit on this, off the
Yeah.
cuff a few minutes ago about the government not taking its role seriously in vetting the sponsors that these people and they're supposed to be helping these kids.
Yeah, that's the biggest weakness right now, Mark. And it's not, just to be clear, HHS, Department of Health and Human Services, is not the Border Patrol, right?
Mhm.
A different agency is tasked with releasing these people. HHS is not a law enforcement agency, traditional law enforcement agency. And you heard the story that I told about the one woman who found, through her coworkers at a coffee plant in Guatemala or coffee fields, found someone in the US who was willing to step up. And that person was a good person, but how often and that person couldn't believe that she just signs a couple papers and all of a sudden she's the guardian of this 17-year-old. So that's happening every single day. Here's the other issue. They're supposed to do follow-up calls within, yeah, I think it's like 4 to 6 weeks. They're supposed to do follow-up calls and check in. Um, hey, if someone doesn't answer the phone, they don't follow up. So there's really no way to know. The record keeping is, let me say, extremely problematic. Like, we don't know. We can the numbers that we're seeing are really the best case scenario. Now, that's not to say, just so to be fair, that's not to say that all those children who are unaccounted for are in danger. Some of them initially went to one family member or one sponsor and then got a hold of someone else, or someone else who's related contacted them and they just left. But there's no follow-up, marks. So,
Right.
here's where these kids go. I think the three most popular cities where unaccompanied minors are placed are Houston, Dallas, and Los Angeles. And we're talking, I don't know, thousands of children in one town, Culpeper, Virginia. Now, I don't know how, but a lot of Guatemalan unaccompanied minors are ending up in Northern Virginia. And it happens just based on, uh, I guess, where sponsors are available or where family is. Just in that town of Culpeper, Virginia, they have 35 children. Now, the police there take it very serious. They have a different approach to addressing the issue. They have at least 35 children who disappeared from the homes of federally designated caretakers. That's just one small town in Northern Virginia, 35 children. And they actually have full time detectives tasked to address it. But that's the uncommon approach. And the question should be not what is law enforcement doing to look for these kids after they go missing, but why is the federal government, why is HHS allowing these children to be placed somewhere where at this point in time, Mark, there should be knowledge that that in most cases they're not going to stay at that with that family. Why is that being allowed to happen?
Bill, listen, Bill Bodner, special agent in charge. This is why I have you on the show as often as I can, quite frankly, because you dig deep, and you crystallize the
Yeah.
problem. You crystallize it. Why isn't why isn't the federal government doing their job? Um, how is this being allowed to happen? And I really appreciate the points you made, Bill, that the fact that any individual or any number of children are not contacted doesn't necessarily mean something bad, nefarious has happened to them. In fact, probably the majority, they probably are okay. But where does that leave us with a large percentage who end up, by the way, in the previous article I was reading, I didn't read it to you, but it talks about how many end up in dangerous jobs that are in violation of child labor laws, and they're being exploited. These are basically it's ransom. They haven't been working these jobs to pay back the cartels, pay back mules,
Mhm.
and they're working in violation of federal law, local law, state law. And again, a number of them end up being injured or killed in some of these very dangerous jobs. So it's um it's astronomical, the problem that we're dealing with. Let me touch on this article here. This is from a publication called World, and this is also from this year's January of 2024. Um, as record numbers of migrants continue to enter the United States from Mexico, border authorities are also seeing high numbers of minors traveling without a legal guardian. This is very
Mhm.
interesting. In response to the surge in unaccompanied youth, the Biden administration is releasing children to sponsors in an average of 28 days. Prospective hosts can fill out their paperwork remotely, and caseworkers rarely visit the home. Officials are required to follow up with the child via a phone call 1 month later. And
Mhm.
you were saying a couple of weeks,
Yep.
whatever, 1 month
Yep.
later, Bill, you're just right on target there. Being between 2021 and 2022, 85,000 unaccompanied children, one third of children released to sponsors in the US, didn't pick up the phone. The government is unable to account for their whereabouts or welfare. So, and this is again what you were talking about. Again, we're not going to jump to the conclusion that all those 85,000 are in peril,
You're right.
but we don't know what we don't know.
Yeah.
This is the problem. Listen, I literally get a phone call, like the 2 times that, we forgot to call the school and say that our kid was sick. We get a phone call or a text from the school, "Where's your kid?"
Yeah.
You know?
Yep.
It's, "Oh my god, we know what we forgot to text the teacher or email the teacher," whatever, he's under the weather, things like this. But here we have tens of thousands of kids whose whereabouts we are unaware of. This is frightening.
Here, Mark, here's a number that I'm just coming up with. Well, I shouldn't say I'm coming up with it off the top of my head. I'm not. It's a factual number, but I'm just kind of dividing it, per day. About 100 minors per day are released by HHS to unrelated sponsors.
Mhm.
100 minors every single day in this country. 100 children are released to unrelated sponsors. Um, yeah, that's I don't know that
It's
that's the way things should be done.
No, it shouldn't be. And by the way, this is I just pull this out here, something I know. The number exploded in 2021. President Biden exempted unaccompanied minors from Title 42, the COVID-19 no entry policy. that allowed immigration authorities to immediately return illegal aliens to Mexico. So he ended that.
Hmm.
Many children were already waiting across the border. It was kind of like releasing a pressure valve, said Podkol. This is someone quoted earlier in the article. For example, in August, border officials referred an average. Now, again, this is last year in 2023. Referred an average of 431 children per day to the U.S. Department of Health and Services,
Hmm.
Health and Human Services. The Biden administration was forced to reopen an emergency site to house children as traditional shelters reached capacity.
Right.
So you just you simply can't manage. By the way, this is why they reopened the shelters that were so demonized under the previous administration,
Yeah.
because they could not vet enough people and to get these kids sponsors. We could go on and on and on with this, Bill, but let me ask you this question, and
Yeah.
we'll wind down here. What do you think is going to happen if we have a change of administration? And again, I don't have the answer. I'm asking.
Hmm.
I'm asking you. You were in federal government. You worked there for 3 decades. What do you think is going to happen in regards to the the vetting and the safety of and for these really quite, for lack of a better word, these missing children? Because we don't know where many of them are, Bill, if we get a
Yeah.
change in administration.
Yeah. I think things will be tightened up, Mark. There's no question about that. And it starts with the rhetoric. You have to make it clear that their children won't be admitted. And if that clears up a lot of the problem before it even starts. And granted, of the children that make it here, I don't know, maybe a half or so are placed with family or something, and that's understandable. But it's like, what about the other ones? And you just there has to be some significant changes to policy. The vetting of uh, people with no relationship to the children has to increase substantially. And, I think probably those two things, uh, the rhetoric so that people don't come, and then the change in the vetting and just saying, hey, uh, and perhaps maybe even if maybe the release to someone that's, completely unrelated just stops, and there's deportation. I don't know, because, you don't wanna take a child that's here in the United States and then put them in a situation back across the border in, say, Mexico, where then they're gonna be at risk. So it starts on the front end by saying, "Do not come here," right? "Do not come here, you will not be admitted." And then once if and when they do arrive, the vetting has to be stepped up if we're releasing these people to guardians.
Bill, you make an excellent point that for some of these kids, we've been put now into a situation that's almost untenable because we don't want to send them back
Yep.
in a situation. At the same time, they may not be here legally. It's a very, very tough case to deal with. But you're absolutely right. The first thing is to stop the bleeding, so to speak. We have to cut this off and not to encourage, incentivize this behavior to continue. Bill, I have you on when I can because you are a breath of fresh air. You are a clear thinker and you are an investigator getting deep in the weeds. Special Agent Bill Bodner, retired DEA. Appreciate it, my friend. Ladies and gentlemen, and check out Bill Bodner on his podcast. You'll see me there sitting next to him every time, and that is Truth Nation. We have a lot of fun on his channel, and he helps me out here from time to time. We really appreciate the partnership and the friendship. So God bless you, Bill. God bless you, everyone listening, and we'll see you next time here on your Leo Nation.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you.